Some moments in sports don't just make headlines. They tear through the entire fabric of a sport and force everyone, players, coaches, fans, league officials, to stop whatever they are doing and pay attention. This is one of those moments. A public insult. Directed at the most famous baseball player on the planet. Delivered not in a private locker room conversation, not in a post-game whisper caught by a nearby microphone, not in an anonymous quote buried in a beat reporter's notebook, but publicly. Loudly. In a way that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. And then, as if the words alone weren't enough to shake the foundation of an entire city, the 9th inning arrived. And everything exploded. A brawl. Not the kind of half-hearted pushing and shoving that baseball occasionally produces when tempers run slightly too hot. A real, full-scale, benches clearing, coaching staff sprinting, security rushing confrontation that turned the final inning of a baseball game into something that looked nothing like baseball at all. Los Angeles is used to drama. This city has seen championships and collapses, dynasties and disasters, moments of pure sporting brilliance and moments of breathtaking controversy. But what happened between Corey Seager and Shohei Ohtani, what was said, what followed those words, and what the 9th inning revealed about the tension that had been building long before anyone in the stadium realized it, is something this city has not seen before. And the baseball world is still trying to process it. Stay with us. Because the story behind this story is far more complex, far more human, and far more revealing than any breaking news alert can capture in a single sentence. To understand how this moment happened, you have to understand the unique and increasingly complicated dynamic that defines baseball in Los Angeles right now. This is a city with two teams. Two identities. Two sets of fans who share streets, share restaurants, share workplaces, and share a city that is large enough for everyone but not always large enough for two competing claims to baseball supremacy. For years, the balance of power in this city was relatively settled. One team carried the weight of consistent contention. The other rebuilt, retooled, made moves in the off-season, and spoke about the future with the confidence of an organization that believed deeply in what it was constructing. And then Ohtani arrived. Not just as a player. As a phenomenon. As something the sport had never quite produced before, a figure whose impact on a franchise extended far beyond statistics or wins and losses, into the territory of cultural significance, global attention, and a kind of magnetic pull that changed the conversation around his team everywhere, immediately and completely. The city felt it. Both sides of the city felt it. And Corey Seager felt it too. Seager is not a man who speaks carelessly. He is a professional in the truest sense of the word, measured, focused, someone who has built his reputation on consistency and performance rather than personality or public declarations. When he speaks, people listen, precisely because he doesn't speak often. Which is exactly why what he said about Ohtani hit so hard. The insult didn't come from nowhere. Context matters here. And the context was a city in the middle of a rivalry that had quietly intensified over months, fueled by standings implications, by fan bases growing increasingly tribal, by the kind of competitive pressure that builds slowly and then releases all at once in a single unexpected moment. Seager's words about Ohtani were not vague. They were not the kind of carefully worded competitive trash talk that players deploy strategically and then walk back with a smile after the game. They were specific. Personal. And they targeted something that goes beyond baseball performance, something that touched on how Ohtani is perceived, how he is celebrated, and whether that celebration, in Seager's view, was entirely deserved. He questioned the narrative. In a sport built on narratives, on the stories we tell about players, about what they represent, about what their success means, questioning the narrative of the sport's most celebrated figure is an act of genuine provocation. It doesn't matter whether the words were entirely fair or entirely unfair. What matters is that they were said. That they were heard. That they spread through the baseball community with the speed and force of something that had been waiting to be said by someone, and Seager was the one who said it. By the time the game began that evening, Ohtani knew what had been said. Every player in both dugouts knew. The stadium knew. And the 9th inning was still hours away. What made the eventual eruption so powerful was the way the game itself built toward it. For 8 innings, both teams played with a controlled intensity that felt almost theatrical, as though every player on the field understood that something larger than the game itself was unfolding, and they were all choosing, consciously or unconsciously, to honor that tension by playing with everything they had. Ohtani was locked in from his first at-bat. There are games where you can see from the very first pitch that a player has arrived at the field carrying something extra. An additional layer of focus. A stillness in the eyes that suggests the noise of the outside world has been completely filtered out, leaving only the purest version of competitive intention. This was one of those games for Ohtani. He worked every at-bat deep into the count. He made adjustments between appearances at the plate that demonstrated the kind of real-time processing that separates genuinely elite hitters from everyone else. He was not just competing against the pitching staff he was facing. He was competing against something internal, the fire that Seager's words had lit, and channeling it with a discipline that was almost frightening to watch. Seager, on the other side, was equally locked in. He was not a man carrying guilt or second thoughts about what he had said. He was a man who had made a decision, stood behind it, and was now playing with the conviction of someone who believes completely in his own position. His at-bats were aggressive. His defense was sharp. He was present in a way that suggested the controversy had not rattled him, it had clarified him. For 8 innings, these two forces, Ohtani's focused fire, Seager's sharp conviction, existed in the same space without direct collision. The 9th inning changed that. It began with a play at the base. Not the brawl itself, that came moments later. But the play that created the conditions for everything that followed. A close play, the kind that requires an umpire to make a judgment call in real time, the kind where the difference between safe and out lies in a fraction of a second that no human eye can process with perfect accuracy. The call went against Ohtani's team. And that call, in that moment, in that game, with all of the weight that had been accumulating since Seager's public words, was the spark. Words were exchanged first. Not between Ohtani and Seager specifically, not immediately. Between players who had been sitting on the edge of their emotions for the entirety of a game that had felt like more than a game from the moment it began. Words that in any other context, on any other night, would have produced nothing more than a brief exchange and a quick reset. But this was not any other night. When Seager and Ohtani came into proximity, close enough that the words between them were direct, close enough that there was no longer any buffer, no longer any distance that could absorb the tension that had been building since that morning, something broke. The benches emptied. Both dugouts moved with the sudden unified motion that happens when a brawl breaks out in baseball. Players who moments ago were sitting quietly, conserving energy, focused on the game, now sprinting toward a situation with the instinct of people who know their teammate needs them and details can wait. The coaching staffs followed. Security moved from their positions. The umpires spread out across the field trying to create separation, trying to find the center of the confrontation and contain it before it escalated further. For several minutes, the 9th inning of a baseball game ceased to exist. What replaced it was something rawer, more human, and more honest than anything that had happened in the previous 8 innings. Here is what the cameras captured but the commentary couldn't fully explain. This brawl was not really about the play at the base. It was not about a close call, or a disputed tag, or the specific words exchanged in the seconds before the benches cleared. It was about something that had been building in the Los Angeles baseball world for months. When a new force arrives in a city, when a player of Ohtanis magnitude lands in a market and immediately reshapes the entire conversation around baseball in that place, the existing powers feel it. They feel it in the media attention that shifts. In the fan conversations that change. In the way the city starts telling a new story about itself and its relationship to the sport. Seager is one of the best players in baseball. He has been for years. He has performed at an elite level, won at the highest level, and carried a franchise through seasons that required genuine greatness from him night after night. And then Ohtani arrived in the same city. And the conversation changed. Not because Seager became less. But because Ohtani is something so singular, so unprecedented, that his presence in any space inevitably restructures the attention around him. It is not a conscious choice. It is not something Ohtani does deliberately. It simply happens because of what he is. Seager's public words about Ohtani were the surface expression of something deeper, the complex emotion of a great player watching the entire framework of how greatness is recognized shift around him in ways he could not control. That emotion is human. Completely, understandably human. And it exploded in the 9th inning. When the field was finally cleared and the game resumed, under a tension so thick it seemed to press down on every person in the stadium, the result almost felt secondary. Almost. Because baseball has a way of demanding resolution even when everything around it is unresolved. The game continues. The score matters. The innings have to be finished. But in the clubhouses afterward, and in the conversations that spread through the league in the hours that followed, the score was the last thing anyone was talking about. MLBs Response came quickly. Fines would be issued. Suspensions were under review. Both organizations would be required to address what had happened, not just with the league but internally, with their own players, their own coaching staffs, their own understanding of how a rivalry had crossed a boundary that rivalries are not supposed to cross. Ohtani addressed the media with the same calm he always brings to situations that would visibly destabilize most people. His words were measured. Respectful. He did not attack Seager. He did not fuel the narrative that the media was already building at full speed around the incident. He spoke about competition, about the intensity of the game, about moving forward. Seager said less. But what he said carried its own weight, an acknowledgement that the moment had grown beyond what he had intended, without a complete retreat from the position that had started everything. Neither man blinked entirely. Neither man escalated further. But the air between these two teams, between these two sides of a city that was always going to have to figure out how to contain two forces of this magnitude, had permanently changed. Greatness creates friction. Not because great players seek conflict, but because their existence in a space changes the space. It shifts the gravity. It rearranges the hierarchy. And the people who occupied that hierarchy before the shift occurred have to decide how to respond to a new reality they did not choose and cannot control. Seager's public insult was not the action of a villain. It was the action of a competitor, a genuinely great competitor, navigating the psychological complexity of sharing a city with someone whose presence redefines what greatness looks like in that city. The brawl in the 9th inning was not the product of one bad play or one bad call. It was the product of months of tension finding its release in a single uncontrolled moment. And Ohtani, as he always does, walked through the center of it without being consumed by it. Without losing himself in the drama. Without letting the noise reach the place inside him where the real work happens. He will prepare for the next game the same way he prepares for every game. Completely. Obsessively. With a focus that makes everything else, the insults, the brawls, the headlines, the breaking news alerts, feel like weather passing through a city that has seen everything. Los Angeles has seen a lot. But it has never seen anything quite like this. And something tells us, it is only just beginning.